Welcome to the Cycling Over 60 podcast, Season 2, Episode 1, Season 2 Challenge. I'm your host, Tom Butler. Welcome to the launch of Season 2 of the Cycling Over 60 podcast. If you are new, Season 1 was about my goal of doing the 206-mile Seattle to Portland ride, also known as the STP. I'm happy to say I completed that challenge, so now I'm moving on. This episode is about finding a new challenge. I need to start out by addressing some criticism I received from last episode. A listener named Judson has given me some great advice. By the way, Judson is artistic director for brass band Northwest, whose motto appears to be, quote, serious fun. However, Judson emailed me to say that he felt I made a significant mistake last episode in my characterization of my wife Kelly as nearly perfect. He highlighted two key pieces of information. One is that Kelly listens to me when I get home from a ride as I go on and on about my Strava data. This is true. He also emphasized that I was able to purchase 2 bikes in a 3-month period, and that is also true. In his view, I slighted Kelly, and I should have said that she was perfect rather than nearly perfect. He went on to say she was clearly an angel from heaven sent to guide me to be my best self. I truly accept this feedback, Judson. I've apologized to Kelly, who clearly enjoyed your email. As I start Season 2 and a start of a new challenge, I want to give an update on my situation. I am certainly stronger and more fit than I was a year ago. However, I am still far from my goal to hit 200 pounds. I'm surprised that I didn't lose much weight during my training for the STP. I am now 225 pounds, which is only 5 pounds down from where I started at 230. Another big disappointment is that my A1C is only down from 7 to 6.9. I am careful with sugar intake, so I think my blood glucose isn't terrible, but I certainly don't want my A1C to be that high. These two factors mean to me that first and foremost, Season 2 needs to be about getting my weight down. Therefore, I am currently on day 3 of a strict 70-day program. I'm not someone who needs a ton of variety when it comes to meals, so I'm going to eat pretty much the same thing for 70 days. For breakfast, I will have oatmeal with walnuts and blueberries. Lunch will be a huge salad with beans and corn chips, and supper will be a shake. I will sometimes do a protein drink for supper, and sometimes a green smoothie with berries and super greens. The absolute key for the 70 days is to stop eating between meals, but I will also eat all my meals in a 9-hour window. I know it is recommended to do an 8-hour window, but for me, 9 hours is just going to have to do. For the last 3 days, I have been hungry. This program is as much about me accepting that the feeling of being hungry is not going to kill me as anything else. I believe that I simply need to reset the pursuit of dopamine that defines my in-between meal snacking. I might address this more in a future episode, but I will leave it here for now. If I find I am losing weight too rapidly, I will change up my meals a bit, but I don't think this will be the case. In addition to changing my eating, I also plan to ride every day. However, I must admit that the last 3 days have been crazy and I have had to ride the exercise bike rather than getting outside. So not an awesome start. I'm going to do shorter rides during the week and save 25-mile or longer rides for the weekend. At least that's the plan for now. In addition to riding, I'm going to hit the gym 3 times a week. I'm really interested to see what building upper body mass will do for my weight loss efforts. And I'm going to find a trainer to help me ride stronger. I don't think I should be riding so slow, and it seems like my legs are the limitation. I'm really interested to see what impact I can make on increasing my speed by building leg strength. So these are the things I'm focusing on for the next 67 days. I'll be checking my weight, even though it is an imperfect measurement of lean mass. I will review my body composition at the end of 67 days, which is the first week of October. I will also check my A1C again. I'm anxious to see what impact this kind of program has. My weight loss, well, actually fat loss, is the first thing that I want to address as I start Season 2. However, I do want to have a biking challenge for Season 2 as well. I recently ran across a journalist by the name of Deshais. I have really enjoyed reading his articles, and I decided to invite him on the podcast to talk about my next goal. We also got into some other interesting topics as well. Here's my interview. I had an opportunity to experience my guest today in reading some of the things he's written and really enjoyed it. I like cycling. I'm a fan of cycling, and I can tell that he is too. So I want to welcome Nick Deshais to the podcast. Hi, Nick.
Hey, Tom, thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here and chat with you.
Yeah, well, thanks for taking the time. And you are a journalist. And what led you to a career in journalism?
Well, I'll try to give the short version, but I've been in journalism about 15 years, and I was going to college at Portland State University, and one of those college students that just like taking classes. So I took a lot of science. I thought I'd be a math major, a chemistry major, and then I just on a whim took an intro to news writing, and it's basically been going ever since. It was fun. I found it to be easy. It got harder, of course, as time went on, but that was it. And this was 2007, so newspapers were already in trouble as they are now. So it wasn't like it was the golden age of newspapers, but I just loved it. I loved the idea that as a journalist, I'm independent. I get to kind of follow stories I love. I get to call out powerful people who are doing perhaps wrong things or bad things, and I get to speak for or carry the water for people who don't have as much power. So it just seems really, at the time, very alluring. And I've done pretty well. I've been able to move around the country, and now I'm an editor of a newspaper in Spokane. So I think I've done okay, and it still keeps me excited to come to work every day. So that's kind of the short story. The long story is I've always loved writing, and I don't know, if you haven't been in journalism, you don't know how exciting every day can be, where I don't go to work every day and have to do the same thing. Every day is a new story. Every day is a new person to talk to. Every day I get to go somewhere new. So it's a pretty exciting field despite the challenges that we face.
Well, I just love the creativity, and I'm always inspired, always impressed by people that get up every day and, bring creativity, to stories. So good on you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
And cycling is one of the areas that you're interested in and you write about. I'm curious, what are some others?
Well, I guess to answer that question, I'll explain how I got into writing about cycling. I mean, I've always loved riding my bike. I've been a primary bicycle commuter since the year 2001-ish, since I was a pretty young guy. And I just find it to be the greatest way to travel around. It's a joyful way to get to work, unlike driving a car, which can be maddening, as we all probably know. But when I got into newspapers, I was basically a political and a government reporter. And I was covering City Hall here in Spokane. And I just thought I need something that touches City Hall, but isn't so heightened and ideological and political and partisan. And I thought, sometimes wrongly, I think, but I thought transportation is that. Everybody, we all share the roads. We all have similar thoughts of like, maybe the roads could be better, and maybe, the commute could be better, this and that. And in that, I covered a lot of, road building. I covered transit. And for me, it was bicycling. And, when I look back on my career, my first job as an intern and then briefly as a staff writer was at a newspaper in Portland called Willamette Week. One of my first stories was on a city rule requiring brakes to be put on single speed bikes. So I've covered bicycles for a long time, just always in the background. And then it was around 2015, I was at the daily paper here, and one of the editors said, "Hey, do you have an idea for a bigger story?" And I said, "Actually, yeah, I do. I would like to ride across Washington State on the newly created or defined U.S. Bicycle Route 10, which is basically Highway 20 up north. It's part of the Northern Tier route. People are familiar with that." And they said, "Great." So I spent 10 days riding my bike and doing daily dispatches that appeared on the front page of the paper every day. And so that was my first real foray into like deep bicycle reporting. And I reported on not just how the ride was and how I felt, but businesses along the way. I talked to fellow bike tourists who were riding. I described what I saw. It was just a very exciting thing to do. And since then, I've done that a couple more times. On my own time, I go on bike tours. I still commute to work every day. And then, of course, when I became the editor of the paper, The Inlander, where I'm at right now, one of my first big stories, 4,000 word stories, was all about how to make Spokane a world-class bicycling city. I think a lot of people think, what, Spokane, a bicycling city? Sometimes I think that too, but the gist of the story was we have such promise here in Spokane to make this a great cycling city. A lot of American cities do, and I kind of pointed out the ways we could make changes to make it a bike place.
And that's some of the stuff that I ran across was your journaling, basically, of your trip, and really enjoyed that. And I think, the focus on businesses and things like that, I think that really enriched that experience. You mentioned you're an editor. What does that entail? What does it mean to be an editor?
Yeah, it's an interesting job because you don't just become an editor. It's after years of experience as a reporter or just a staff writer. And I did that for a long time. This is my first position as a leader in a newsroom. And so I don't do the daily stuff that I used to. I don't call people and interview them and write stories every day, but I get to kind of define the larger movements of our paper. We are a weekly, we're an alt weekly. So if you're familiar with that, like Seattle Weekly or Willamette Week, things like that. We're a newspaper for sure, but we kind of got a magazine vibe too. We have a big, beautiful front page or, cover. We have a news section, culture section, this and that. So I basically lead the crew. I plan out months in advance what we may have on the cover. I am also the news editor, so I lead the news team here and what's the news of the week. I have a good partner here in Deshais who leads the culture team. So we just got to make sure that every week we're kind of covering the big stories and we're writing things that are interesting for people. And so what I'm missing out on, the exciting stuff that I used to love so much of meeting people and going out and just experiencing the city and telling the stories of it. Now I try to use my experience with the younger writers that work here and say, oh, have you talked to this person? Or maybe thought about this, or maybe you should write it this way, or here's a story idea for you. So I kind of, I don't know the right word for it, but I'm a bit of the motivational speaker / logistics sort of guy.
Well, I could really ask you a bunch of questions about the future of news and reporting and, what's happening with truth reporting, all kinds of things that I could get lost in. But let's stay focused on cycling here. You made an appeal in an article in the Inlander for this summer to be the quote, summer of wheels. What moved you to make that appeal?
Well, it's interesting. As a journalist, we follow a code of ethics, right? I'm going to start with this because we need to put that out there. Like, we need to be fair. We need to be able to represent all sides of a story. We want to minimize harm. These are all things from the Society of Professional Journalists that most journalists adhere to. We're a profession, so we have our own code of ethics. And, it's not a law. Like, if I lie, I'll lose my job. I won't go to jail necessarily. I mean, somebody could sue me, not to get in the weeds, but we create this code of ethics and we make sure we follow it. It's this kind of something we follow. It's our code, right? So the bicycle thing is kind of a personal passion of mine, right? So people think, well, you can't do that. You're promoting bikes. And I said, well, I am kind of promoting bikes, but I'm trying to talk about a different way, a solution, a different way we can live our lives. And I've traveled the world. I've been lucky enough to travel the world. I've ridden bikes all over the world. I've ridden bikes in Paris. I've ridden bikes in Taipei, Taiwan, South America, all over the place. And I've seen the way different cities operate. So I bring that knowledge back and I say, hey, we don't have to live our lives this way. Our cities are so congested with cars. And as I said at the beginning of our talk, and I'll say it again, there's road rage for a reason. It's maddening to be behind the wheel of an automobile sometimes. It doesn't have to be that way. And so I'm bringing another sort of option for people. And the thing that really gets me is here in America, we talk a lot about liberty and freedom, and our transportation system is anything but that. We have one choice. It's the car. That is the opposite of liberty. Liberty means you have choices before you choose what you want. So I always agitate. I always say we can have more choices. We are being told we only get one option for transportation, where in fact, most cities around the world and countries comparable to ours have many choices. I could walk, I could take the bus, I could take a train, I could ride my bike, I could drive. So that's when I bring bikes up. But to answer your question, it was kind of in this, it's maybe the fourth or fifth story I've written about bikes since I've been the editor of the Inlander over this past year, where I've told people like, hey, let's try a bike out. You should try the bicycle. It's a beautiful city to be on a bicycle. Summertime in Spokane is the reason we all live in Spokane. It's a beautiful season here. The winter can be hard. Our shoulder seasons are shrinking as everywhere, but the summer is glorious here. We have lakes everywhere. The sun is shining. The weather is wonderful. And there are great bike rides here. We have the Centennial Trail, which connects Spokane to Coeur d'Alene. You could ride your bike all the way to Coeur d'Alene, 40 miles east of here. The Trail of the Coeur d'Alenes is an old rail trail in the middle of nowhere, the wilderness. You get to ride over a bridge over the south end of Lake Coeur d'Alene and ride through the Silver Valley and, be within 10 feet of a moose if you're lucky. This Hiawatha route, there's the Palouse to Cascades Trail. There's all kinds of riding opportunities here where people who live in Seattle and Portland and other, regional cities have beautiful bicycling infrastructure, but they're still much larger cities than Spokane. I can ride ride my bike and be in a forest within 10 minutes, Riverside State Park. And so I'm just constantly telling people in Spokane, like, hey, we live in this paradise for bicycles, so give it a shot. And this last year, I've written a lot about it. And I know you've probably thought and talked a lot about it. With the advent of e-bikes, there's no excuse anymore. People used to say, it's too hard, I'm not in good enough shape, or there's a hill or something. Well, get an e-bike and you can fly. So I'm just trying to get people on bikes and try to experience the joy that I get to have on a bicycle on a daily basis, really.
Yeah, the focus of this podcast is how to stay cycling after 60 years old and later on in life. And I love it when I see, I'm on a trail or something and I see somebody on an e-bike and you just feel like if it wasn't for an e-bike, this person probably wouldn't be out here. And so I love e-bikes. I love pedaling and not having that assist and seeing what I'm capable of. So I love that too for me for now, but I am 100% sure that someday I will be using an e-bike for at least some rides.
Yeah, I agree. And it didn't take me long to get to it. I think before e-bikes really became what they were, I just thought they would always have a throttle and people would just be on a motorcycle on a trail. And I was not a fan of that. I'm still not. I think people should go slower. I think we should have a 20 mile per hour speed limit on these trails. But with the pedal assist, I soon saw, like you were saying, people, my commute home is up the South Hill of Spokane, which can be a little steep. I've been passed multiple times by people who clearly may not have ridden a bike as much as me, but are smiling, passing me, waving at me, enjoying it still pedaling, still getting exercise, still being out there and being in the fresh air and part of the world. And they would be in a car otherwise. And I think that's the future. That's how we can get a lot of people on bikes. And that's how people can actually ride a bike and not feel like they're, sweating or have to show up to work covered in sweat or whatever.
Right. Thinking about bikes, I think you're making a compelling argument for bicycles, but I am very biased. So, but what do you see about bicycles, including e-bikes, from a perspective of climate impact?
It's a good question. As a journalist, I try to think of the bicycle from as many perspectives as I can think of, right? I try to get outside of my own biases and my own preferences and think about it from different perspectives. So from one perspective, it is an amazing tool to fight what's happening to our world. If you look at where the emissions come from in the States, it's from the transportation sector. And a lot of that is from people sitting alone in their car, driving somewhere that's shorter than 5 or 6 miles. Perfect distance for a bicycle, especially an e-bike. So if we can just get more people out of their cars, we can start pulling those emissions down while, and I hate to keep beating on this, but while increasing our joy coefficient or whatever you want to call it, we could lessen our impact on our earth, which we are having such an impact. When I think about humans, it makes me very happy because we are so smart and we're so successful and we're doing so well. Look at the world we've created around us, but we're having such a large impact and we're smart enough not to do it. And that's what annoys me is like, we know better. We all know what's going wrong and we know how to fix it. We just aren't doing. I don't know if it's convenience or what it is, but that's when I see the bike. I really, truly see the bike as some sort of solution or I'm blanking on the word right now, but our salvation. Basically, it's this simple machine that doesn't take much. It's inexpensive, especially compared to an automobile, especially when you take in the life of cost of a car with insurance and gas and maintenance. It's pennies on the dollar. If you're really into it, you can fix it in your garage or on your front lawn or on your front porch or in your living room. You don't have to take it to a mechanic, though I take mine to a mechanic. I like to support local bike shops, of course. So I think it really could be big. And, I'm not a doomsayer. I'm not a cynical person. I'm a pretty optimistic guy. I think just me talking to you, me writing an article, if I can convince one person to give the bicycle a shot and they decide I'm going to ride one day a week to work, I think that's a huge impact. I think that could slowly draw it down. And I do think this idea of kind of the feedback loop, the self-feeding mechanism where more people ride, more people will see them riding, want to give it a shot. City leaders will say, oh, look at all these people riding. We better build safer infrastructure. I think it could build on its own success. So I think it could be big.
I really think it's compelling to think about the bicycle as a machine that is much more friendly to the environment. And at the same time, it meets another big need that we have as people. So we're not only going miles without burning fossil fuels, the energy that I'm burning is energy that I don't need on me. And so, for me, when I started cycling again, I felt weak. I felt, I had these lifestyle diseases that I was struggling with. I was on medication. And just in a year, there's been a big change for me where I feel so much stronger. I'm not taking medication. So there's like this double whammy, which is I'm not stuck in a car. And plus, I'm using my body in a way that I really need to and that I wouldn't have to because of the way our lifestyle is. I don't have to use my body that way.
Yeah, it's. I think you and I are in the same boat. I mean, I'm very partial to the bicycle, so I can only think of positive things. I know there's some negative things that I could probably rustle up in my head, but to me, it's just so obvious. I don't have to go to the gym, and I can still stay fit. Today's world, especially in the States, it's very easy to not move, be complacent, be very unhealthy and eat unhealthily. So you have to kind of look for these healthy things. And that's why I love the bike is I don't have to look too far. Every day I'm getting exercise just by going to work or by going to the grocery store, let alone the recreational rides I put myself on. And it's, to me, it's that sort of health you can feel in your own body is what could happen to the planet itself, right? Like you're seeing your body and you're feeling the health aspects and the benefits of it. I think that's just easily transferable to the earth we live on. So yeah, I totally agree. It's just one of these, I don't know. I mean, I hate to just say bicycle will fix everything, but I kind of believe it will fix everything because it makes you healthy. It makes our world healthy. The other thing I love about being on long bike rides is meeting other bicyclists. And even, I don't know if you got this experience on STP, but when you have like stuff on your bike and you're clearly riding a long distance, people like are just interested in talking to you. And so it's kind of a community builder too. People are just kind of in good moods on bikes and they want to chat. Where are you headed? Where are you going? Wow, what a crazy trip you're on. It's just it checks all the boxes for me.
It is something that I find that not everybody's excited about. I'm sure that you have experience being on a road and having people make comments to you, like get off the road. So there is something in the psyche of a number of people out there that's like the roads are for cars and that's it.
Since I've been a journalist covering this for so long, not just bicycles, but roads, the laws of the road, how the roads were built. I have been yelled at, not very often. I'm a very defensive rider, and I'm not one of those riders who's like, I'm going to go on the busy street in Spokane and take the lane. I'm not that sort of guy, though I know my rights. But I kind of, when somebody yells at me, usually it's like you just give them whatever, like shake of the head, or you put your hand up, like whatever, I'm not listening to you. But sometimes I want to have a conversation with them. And I would tell them, the first pavement in Spokane, as in a lot of American cities, was brought to you by bicyclists. Bought it, we paid for it, we put it down because we wanted a smooth tarmac to ride on. And it literally is true. In 1890, not far from where I'm sitting, was the first pavement in Spokane by the wheelmen of Spokane. I don't remember the official name, but it was the bicyclists, Spokane bicyclists or something. Not only that, so that's the historic, pavement brought to you by bicyclists, not cars. But beyond that, we have a right to the road. The road is not exclusive for automobiles. And in fact, roads have been around a very long time, longer than the automobile. And there is a very well-told history by a historian named Peter Norton. It's called Fighting Traffic. And it was all about when cars came to American cities and the tragic scourge of children being hit by cars because children were so used to playing in the street. It was a playground because everything was so slow moving. They had nothing to fear. And then these powerful machines showed up that weren't really, there was no speed limits really at the time. They were just blazing through neighborhoods, blazing in streets. And so many kids and people were hit and killed by cars. And there was this massive movement about 100 years ago, led by parents, led by mothers, to stop cars and to get speed limits put in place and have rules put on the road. And they were, but that's so long ago now that our parents' parents don't even remember that. But I try to remind people your car, you and your car, and I have a car. I'm not anti-car, but we're guests on this road. We share the road with everybody. So we need to be very mindful of that. I understand when you're on a highway, you don't want to see a bicycle. You want to go 70 miles per hour. But when you're driving in my neighborhood, you have to go slow because I might be on my bike. My cat may be crossing the street. My child may be playing. You have to go slow. And I don't think people really appreciate that. I think the over convenience of the cars led us all to think, I need to go where I'm going as fast as I can. And if you're in my way, I'm going to be really angry at you. I think we all need to take a step back and realize, even if I have to slow down and let the bicycle slowly go ahead of me for a little bit, my commute probably will be lengthened by a minute at the most, a minute, which is a very small unit of time. So we should all take a breath, realize that there's more people on this planet than just me. Like I can be slightly inconvenienced to not be so filled with rage. But again, I don't know what it is, the psychology of being in an automobile. And I feel it too when I get so impatient. I get so like, I need to go. I need to go. It's just something about being in a car that I don't know what it does to us. But I don't get that on a bike. I don't know if you do, but I never feel impatient on a bike. I never get ragey. If somebody cuts me off in a car, I get scared and angry, but it's never like, get out of my way. I'm going somewhere right now.
Well, I think that's great thoughts. Just the concept of maybe as Americans, when we get behind a wheel, we need to step back and, just think about how our mindset is controlled by driving and the fact that we want to get someplace instantly.
Yeah.
So I am on this quest now. This is the launch of the second season of my podcast.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm looking for a challenge to take on. I think the STP was a fantastic challenge to take on, but I'm now looking for my next challenge. And you've been around the Northwest. You've been around the world biking. And you mentioned some rides earlier. I'm wondering if you were to talk about like 2 or 3 of your favorite biking experiences, what would those be?
Oh, yeah. Well, there's so many, but I have a couple I can think of right away. But if I think about it too much, I'll have 50 to mention to you. Just the top 2. And I already mentioned them, but I'll mention them again in just a little more detail. I'd say the best one, my favorite one, I just did it again this last weekend, is the Trail of the Coeur d'Alenes. I think it's about 70 miles. So it's long, but it's not super long. And it basically stretches across the panhandle of Idaho, North Idaho. So it goes from Washington to Montana. One terminus is in Plummer, which is close here to Washington, and the other is in Mullen, which is up in the mountains towards Montana. It's an old rail built for the mines, so it wasn't used in a long time. And then in the 90s, the Coeur d'Alene tribe and various governmental agencies built this trail on top, in part for recreation, but in part it was environmental mitigation because this rail was built with horrible tailings from the mine, and it was just an environmental disaster. And, paving it as a way to kind of cap it and keep it from leaching into the environment. So it kind of killed a couple birds with one stone. And the result is this magical place in the middle of nowhere. I love to park in Plummer, and its first 6 miles is downhill through this beautiful valley, forested valley. You take a turn, all of a sudden there's the southern end of Lake Coeur d'Alene. It has a different name down there, like Jacques-Colette Lake, but basically the southern end of Lake Coeur d'Alene. Beautiful gleaming water, forested hills. And then you go over this old bridge, this old rail bridge that takes you, 50, 60, 70 feet in the air over the lake. Then you ride along right on the edge of the lake, just right next to the lake. It's so gorgeous. And I remember the first time I rode on it 10 years ago or something like that. I just was riding and thinking, this is amazing. Like, is this real? Is this a real place that I've never been to before? And I remember thinking, this is perfect. The only thing that could make this better is if I turn the corner and there's a little cafe where I can get an espresso. And a mile later, I turn the corner, there's this town called Harrison. Oh, guess what? There's a cafe, there's ice cream, there's wine tasting. It was paradise. So wonderful.
Nice.
That's only the first, 10, 12 miles. And there's still more. We can get deep, deep, deep into the wilderness through the Finger Lakes. And, another ride on there, I saw 4 or 5 moose, one within 10 feet of me with his huge antlers. So highly recommend that. It's fun to, if you can do 70 miles in a day, start and go to Wallace, which is a beautiful mountain town. Spend the night there, come back. If you want to split up, there's camping, there's other places to stay. Just a great ride. I did it this weekend with my wife, and we only did a few miles, or maybe 10 miles of it, but I was counting bike riders. I saw 80 people over the course of a couple hours. So you're still in the middle of nowhere, but you're just seeing bicycles all the time, and everybody, of course, is just having the time of their life because it's so great.
Wow.
So that's one. And the other one is the one I mentioned earlier about U.S. Bicycle Route 10, which is along Highway 20 on the north part of the state. Goes from Anacortes. I rode it all the way to Sandpoint, Idaho. And it's just great because you start at the Sound, Puget Sound. You climb the Cascades. So you're in the rainforesty type stuff. You come down on the dry side. You're kind of in the hot desert, central Washington. You cut due north towards Republic. You're back in the kind of forests of North Washington. So you just pass through all the state has to offer, where you and I know it, but a lot of people don't know Washington State is more than just Seattle and, beautiful conifers. We have a big basin in the middle with mountains. So you just get to experience all of Washington State. And it's a very quiet highway with a massive shoulder. So it feels pretty safe. It is part of the Northern Tier route, which transcontinental bicyclists go from Washington all the way over to Maine. So you just meet a lot of people. I felt like such a tough guy. I was like, oh, I'm on a 10-day trip. I'm riding across a whole state. And they're like, most people are like, I'm riding across an entire country. But those are the two. And if you're asking me my opinion, what to do after STP, I would say bicycle route 10. It's a bigger trip, but it's epic. It's fantastic. If you've done STP, you can do this ride. Climbing the Cascades is difficult, but it is such an accomplishment. You just got to give yourself time, have the right amount of gears. You'll be fine.
There is the Cascade to Palouse Trail, and that does connect down into Seattle by a series of other trails. Those sound like very different experiences.
They do. And, in fact, this last weekend when I was camping the Trail to Coeur d'Alenes, I met a woman who had just done the Palouse to Cascades. And she confirmed what I've thought. I've wanted to do that a while, but it's not improved at all. There's some, the Beverly Bridge got redone. There's a bridge in Rosalia, which is just south of us, that got fixed up. So they're working on it. And it will connect to the Trail to Coeur d'Alenes, or very close anyway. So it'll be an amazing trail when done. But as she said, I think she did 70 miles in a day without seeing a person or any water. Lots of the trail is either sand, where she'd sink in, or boulders that were 3 or 4 inches across. So it's a much harder trip, I think. And you can't do it on a road bike. You would need a mountain bike. It sounds great. Once they pave it, I'll be there.
Okay.
But until then, I'm a little nervous. I was going to do it actually a few years ago with a friend of mine, and we bailed just because we realized we weren't quite prepared for the lack of water. And we were going to do it August, which is a bad idea because it's very, it would be more than 100 degrees every day. Dangerous, obviously, but I have very high hopes for that trail, because like I said, it'll connect to be close to Trail to Coeur d'Alenes, and that same rail trail, or that same former rail bed, goes all the way across Montana. So it could be this amazing 3-4 state ride at some point soon.
Yeah, it's great to follow that. And also we have the Olympic Trail that it sounds like they're working on as well. I think Washington is a great place to be a cyclist.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, not only do we have, people in government who I think appreciate cycling and at least are putting some money towards it. I think they could put more. I still have a lot of criticism for how our money is spent on our transportation systems. I think it's very one-sided, and I think it's very short-sighted. But that said, compared to other states, they do quite a bit. And that, coupled with the natural beauty and splendor we have in Washington State and the Pacific Northwest, I think make it a magical place. I lived in California for a while, down in Southern California, and they're putting money towards bikes, but you're just riding through the city if you're not on the beach. So it's just not as pleasant. We're up here, whether it's Trail to Coeur d'Alenes or the bike route 10 I just mentioned, hours would go by. I wouldn't see a car or a person. I would just hear the sounds of birds and maybe see a moose, maybe see some deer. It's wonderful. We're so lucky to live here.
That's one of the questions that I have. When we did the STP, we were riding from Seattle to Portland. So they're two of the major metropolitan areas in the Northwest. There must be quite a difference between riding in those areas and riding in Western Washington. How would you describe those differences?
Pretty great. I think, I lived in Portland for a long time. The bike infrastructure there is fantastic. I loved riding my bike there. I loved commuting to school and to work. But even there, I would get yelled at every now and again. So I wouldn't say how you're treated by drivers is markedly worse over here. I think people behind the wheel just get, angry or for whatever reason. So that isn't any different. We don't have as much infrastructure here. We have these beautiful trails I mentioned, but as far as protected bike lanes, or a network of bikeways in the city's working on it, but they're just not quite there. But like I said, it would be hard for me to ride out of Portland or Seattle and get to 700 acres of parkland, which we have right here. I mean, I'm almost looking at it from my office, and I'm also looking at downtown Spokane. So it's pretty close. Other than that, I would say the main thing, and this isn't something that's top of mind, I don't deal with this a lot, but to put it in, basic terms, we live in a city. So we live in Spokane, which is progressive and votes blue, for lack of a better term. But once you leave city limits, it's very conservative and votes red. And so as a journalist, I'm always thinking of how do other people think about bikes? And so I always try to put it in terms for people, when I'm talking bikes, it's either the climate advantages of it, or if I'm talking to somebody else, I talk about the frugality and the conservative financialness of being a bicycle rider. I make the point, which I've made in other articles, especially when I did a little bit of this when I rode across bike route 10, that in fact, bike lanes and bicyclists are good for business. The studies have shown that bicyclists spend a little bit more money than if you just have parking spaces and a lane for cars to just pass through on their commute. So there's all kinds of of good things about bikes. And so that's something I think you have to keep in mind more here in Eastern Washington is, we just have different types of political philosophies, and that really informs how people interact with the world, obviously. And so when somebody sees me on a bike in Portland, they may think of me differently than compared to when they see me on a bicycle here in Eastern Washington and North Idaho. But I will say, North Idaho, everybody's probably heard about Idaho's politics. They're not wrong, but there are a bunch of bike routes in Idaho. They've done a very good job, like replacing rails with bikes. And some of my favorite trails are up there, the Trail of the Coeur d'Alenes and the Hiawatha route. So you just never know, I guess.
Yeah. You made me think about the impact of cycling, the economic impact of cycling. And I've been intrigued by what's happening in Iowa. I don't know if you've looked at it at all, but if I understand the numbers right, there's like 30,000 people biking across Iowa.
Oh, is this the, there's that race?
Ragbri, or I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can't imagine. I mean, doing the STP where there was 5,500 people, I'm like, wow, this is a massive bunch of people, but 30,000, I can't imagine 30,000 people rolling into a smaller town in Iowa and kind of what that means. I hope that feels like a positive, because of the economic impact it has for that area, not a negative, because you're experiencing a different world. I think when 30,000 bicycles descend upon your town, you're seeing an image of what the future could be like, and some people might not find that appealing. But I would love to see that. I don't know that I'm ready to be a part of it, but I would love to see it.
I would too. I think that sounds great. I know one or two people that have done it from Iowa here in Spokane, and they say it's great. But bicyclists, we're no Hell's Angels. We're not rolling through with our loud motors and causing havoc. We're there to give me a milkshake or something.
Right. Have a bunch of bananas ready for that day.
Well, and I've been to Iowa. It's a great state, but I'm so partial to the West. All I can think is man, riding across a flat state sounds so boring. Give me mountains, give me streams, give me. And I'm sure that ride is so fun. Just like you were saying, that many people, you can't help but be swept up into this kind of, I don't know, you're probably all just really stoked.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
Yeah. So I rode in a supported ride, and that was really helpful. Being able to pull in and have your choice of Cliff Bars and Dave's Killer Bread. I can't remember what they're called, but I discovered those for the first time. Kind of liked those. But you rode by yourself when you rode across. Talk about how different that is.
Yeah, I've done a few. I've never really done a true supported. It sounds great to me. I'm not it sounds like you're not either, but I'm not like I don't wear Lycra. I don't go as fast as I can. So the supported, usually it's we're going to do 100 miles and I need no weight on me. I'm more of a leisurely guy. My average speed is pretty low because I'm looking around and just enjoying myself. But I will say it's romantic feeling and sounding like I'm carrying my tent and everything I need. I am self-supported. I mean, it sounds great, and it can be, but it also can be very hard. So the romance kind of wears off when you're covered in sweat and you're carrying 50 pounds and then you have to sleep on the ground day after day. So my perfect balance is I'll have my panniers filled with my stuff, but I'll go inn to inn. I'll stay at a hotel. That way I can shower off. I have a bed to sleep in. I can watch a little TV or something. I find that to be a good mix where instead of relying on somebody to kind of tote my stuff around, I've still got my stuff, but I'm not roughing it so much. That's the balance I have. I know some people love to just camp the whole time. Other people love being supported. I have no judgment one way or the other. That's just kind of how I settle. I like feeling like I'm carrying my load. I'm carrying my own stuff. I am self-sustaining, but then I get a little comfort at the end of the day.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm ready for that. I think maybe I should do a overnight trip where I'm carrying everything and see what that's like. That would entail me purchasing some stuff. I'm not set up. I'm set up for car camping, and we don't actually have a tent. We have like a mobile cabin.
Nice.
Our tent is so large. And so, I'd have to pull a trailer on my bike to actually take the tent that we currently have. So I'd have to do some investigation, which sounds like a load of fun to me, going out and like looking at stuff. But, I really feel like having my wife go along in a car, and having stuff and then meeting me at places. I think that could be a really fun balance between the support of the SDP and being out on my own.
Well, and I know people that have done that, and it's fun for everybody. I mean, I don't know how your wife feels, but you're not going super far in a day. It's in a car, you could go way further, obviously, so she'll have some time to kill. But the couples I've known that have done that, they both enjoy it. Whoever's the sag wagon or whatever, whoever's in the car has a lot of free time. They can go to a museum or whatever, see more sights while you're trudging along trying to catch up. But everybody seems to enjoy themselves, so I think it's a good mix. You're still on a cool road trip. You're still kind of getting out of town and seeing stuff. So
Yeah.
that's the fun part for me, is just getting away from it all.
Well, I think you've sold me. So it's Highway 20, but it's considered Bike Route 10.
Yep.
I think that's what I'm going to focus on.
Okay.
I'm not committing today, but I think that sounds like just an awesome thing. And for me to start educating myself about what it would take to do that, I think that's a fair thing to do. Crossing the Cascades, I'm going to do, no matter where, if I was going to go from Western to Eastern, I'm going to cross a mountain range. So that's something I'd have to prepare for, but I like it. I like the sounds of it.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing. And I went from Anacortes east. So Cascades is the first range you go over, and you just kind of do the big one. And
yeah,
I remember the day I was so nervous. It was an 80-mile day, and it's the first time I ever went that far, and I haven't gone that far in a day since. And it's 35 miles up, but then it's 40 miles down. We don't have to pedal. So half the day is really slow and hard. The other half, you're like, oh, no problem. But I have a friend just a couple of weeks ago. He did it the opposite. He started in Sandpoint and went west. He said it was amazing too. So I don't think there's a one way or the other to go. I think most people go from Anacortes west, but it's fun. Like I said, you just see the different ecosystems or types of Washington there are. There are, I think, 4 hills to climb, only Cascades. That's the big one, but there's a few others. And it's just, I love it. I want to do it again. I did it alone. I've been trying to convince my wife to do it with me. I did it in 9 days, about 50 miles a day. So I didn't punish myself, but 50 miles, pretty, day after day, that's a lot. I'm not saying it like the easiest thing I've ever done by any stretch. It was definitely epic, and I'm still proud of myself.
Yeah.
I still think about it. It's still the screensaver on my phone all these years later.
There is something cool about starting in Anacortes. I mean, that's a cool place. And like you said, what an opportunity to see change of scenery as you go by starting in Anacortes.
And it's fun, Anacortes, it's not Seattle or anything, but it's civilization. And then as you slowly make your way west, fewer buildings, fewer cars, all of a sudden you're in the forest, there's nobody around. It's just such a fun transformation.
Yeah. So what are some cycling challenges that you're taking on these days?
That's a good question. I don't have anything in the books. I've just been working a lot, so I've been trying to just keep focused on that. We did just go a few months ago to Paris, specifically, to go to Paris because it's Paris, but also, I don't know if you followed it, but in the last 5 years, they've really spent a lot and made a lot of changes to make it more of a bicycling city. Paris for years had the reputation of being very car oriented, the most, quote unquote, American of the European cities when it comes to cars. And the mayor, I'm forgetting her name right now, doesn't matter her name, but she came in and she started pushing bikes right away, and then COVID hit, and that kind of gave her a little more oomph to push it, keep pushing on it. And it's really fun. It's the first time I've been to Paris, so I can't compare to what it was like before, but I rode up the Champs-Élysées, excuse my French, around the Arc de Triomphe on a bicycle. We rode all around Paris. It was fantastic. And so that's still kind of pushing me forward. 2 weeks ago, we rode our bikes from here in Spokane to Coeur d'Alene for an overnight. That's 40 miles one way or each way, so that's fun. But as far as a big tour, I don't know, I still have, and I talk with my wife quite a bit about it, I still have the dream of leaving everything behind and just riding our bikes around the world. Very unrealistic. She says probably not going to happen, but I still have that kicking around. And, if it all goes to hell, we can just get on our bikes and ride across the entire world.
Do you have a place that you think of, someplace in the world that you think would be really unique to bicycle in?
I do, and I'm trying to make this happen next year with my wife. I want to do a bike tour in Japan.
Okay. I
don't know if you read Bicycle Quarterly. It's out of the Seattle area. It's a great bicycle magazine, but one of the editors there, she's from Japan, and so she and the other editor, I believe they're married. They go to Japan quite a bit, and it never crossed my mind. I've been to Japan. I thought, it'd be great, but as far as bike touring, it never really crossed my mind. But the way they describe it, it's great. You go from onsen to onsen, which are like inns with, I can't even describe it well, but there's a bicycle culture that's been there a long time in Japan, and it just sounds amazing to me. I would love to just ride around Japan for a couple weeks and just hit the mountains and go to Tokyo. And so that's kind of the next thing I really want to do. That's the country I really want to go to on a bicycle.
That's cool. I will look forward to reading your articles about biking in Japan. What are the stories that you think about cycling need to be told or deserve to have more attention in the future?
Yeah. Gosh, I'm not sure. I guess the way I would answer that is, and we're getting away from this, I think for a long time here in America anyway, the image of a bicyclist was either a middle-aged man, like you or I, riding our bikes in Lycra or something, these kind of weekend warriors, which I'm not. I don't think you are either, but, or children. It was either, an athletic guy, a middle-class guy or something, or a child. We just need to get away from bicycles are for everybody. Children ride bikes, yes. But as we mentioned earlier, I hope to ride my bike to my old age, into my 90s or whatever it is. With the e-assist, I can do that. I see old people riding their bikes all the time. It's a machine. It's a vehicle you can use your whole life. I was lucky enough a year ago to spend a month in Denmark and in the Netherlands. And when you go there, it's really eye-opening, especially for an American when you're so used to this one type of transportation. I saw a bike there being pedaled by a very pregnant woman with two other children on it. It was a two-wheeled bike. It wasn't a special bike. And she was wearing normal clothes. She wasn't even wearing a helmet because you don't really need them there because everything's so slow-paced. And it's that image that really sticks with me. I'm like, that's what a bike should be for. That's the family on the bike. That's how safe that bike is. She's wearing normal clothes. She has the most precious things in her life strewn around the bicycle, her children, and she's carrying another child in her, and she's still going to the grocery store or wherever. So that kind of breaking down the stereotypes that are really detrimental, I think, to convincing people to get on a bike, that it's not just for the bravest or the richest among us or the young, innocent people who can't drive a car yet. Bicycling is for everybody. And I think those stories need to be told over and over again of the types of people all of us get to ride our bikes.
You're making me think of the cargo bikes, and I'm kind of intrigued by Trek came out not too long ago. I think it's called the Fetch. I think for Trek to make that kind of bike in the US or make it available in the US, I think that says something about maybe some of the shift, and maybe there were some shifts that happened during COVID that we're seeing, and that kind of bike that's meant to be more of a cargo bike is, people are considering it more.
I think so. And, the data we have on how people commute is imperfect. I'm not going to say it's bad or wrong or anything, but it's just hard to count bikes. It's hard to count cars. It's just hard to count because it's like a liquid. We're just flowing around, right? Or self-reporting, which has its own issues. But I just feel like, my window looks out on the Centennial Trail on the Spokane River Gorge, right downtown Spokane. I just see so many people on bikes. And I feel like we are in a moment now where people are turning to the bike. And I just get worried we're not prepared for it, that our political leaders aren't going to be able to grab this moment in time and solidify it, institutionalize it, or at least contribute to it. But I hope it keeps going because it is fun. Like, just to go back, everything we've talked about today, it feels good. It's healthy. It's just all around good for us. And I think people are starting to realize that. I think people finally are taking climate change seriously. I know a lot of people have for years, but more and more people are realizing like, oh, this is real. Like, I'm seeing it in my weather. I'm seeing it in these fires and these droughts and these extreme events we're having. And my actions do have a difference. The choices I make are important. So I need to make wiser choices. And I think that is shifting people towards the bicycle. And again, it is this kind of feedback loop. The more people that do it, it'll increase, encourage more people to do it. So I'm very happy to see it happen. And the more type of bike, back to your point, the more types of bikes we have, the better. Cargo bikes are awesome. The story I mentioned earlier, how to make Spokane a bike town. One of my recommendations was to have, deliveries in the central city done on cargo bikes. We don't need these massive trucks in downtown Spokane delivering 2 boxes to the coffee shop. We could have somebody on a pedal assist cargo bike that can carry up to 400 pounds, easily do these deliveries downtown. So I'm hoping to see more of that. I'm sure Seattle, there's more going on in Portland and here, but I'm encouraged by what I see locally, but also what I'm reading online and what I see when I travel.
Awesome. Well, Nick, this has been a delight. I'm so glad that you took the time to jump on here and talk to me about these things. I got exactly what I hoped for. I think I've got a good thing to check out, a good ride to check out, Nick's challenge to take on. How can people access your writing, kind of stay up to what you're addressing with your writing?
Yeah, well, Tom, thanks for having me on. It was really a pleasure to talk to you and kind of go over all this stuff. I love talking bikes. I love talking newspapers, so it's been a real joy. Well, I've written for a lot of places, but right now I'm at Inlander, the Pacific Northwest Inlander, where you can find us at inlander.com, inlander.com. My writing is there. And that's pretty much it. I mean, I'm on all the social medias. I don't really contribute much to those nowadays because I got kind of tired of it. But I've written a lot. So honestly, if you just Google my name and bikes, you'll find a bunch of stories I wrote.
Cool. All right. Well, like I said, I'm looking forward to staying connected to your cycling adventures, and hopefully in the future we'll have a time to talk again.
Yeah, that'd be great, Tom.
All right. Take care now.
Thanks.
Bye. I definitely think I have the next step in front of me as far as my Season 2 bike challenge is concerned. I will be researching the suggestion from Nick to do U.S. Bike Route 10, which is Highway 20 here, from Anacortes to Newport, Washington. That is around 400 miles, and in effect, that doubles what I did for the STP. One of the biggest issues I see is going up and over the Cascades. But I'm also going to be riding some of the Cascade to Blues Trail. I don't think I should rule it out until I've ridden part of the trail. However, the lack of places to get water is a very big concern for me. So stay tuned for more on my decision about what route to ride. From the interview, I put up what I think are some great links in the show notes. I'm not going to take the time to go through them all, but check it out. I want to mention again that I'm doing the Great Cycle Challenge again in September. Please consider going to thegreatcyclechallenge.com and seeing where donations go and how they impact children's cancer research. And if you can spare a little for the cause, please search for Tom Butler on their site and make a donation. As always, I'm interested in hearing from you on what challenge you are taking on. Please reach out on the Cycling Over 60 Instagram or via email. You can find both in the show notes. I hope you are finding great rides and developing great friendships on those rides. And remember, age is just a gear change.